think what happened with OFSTED was that, I mean, this Caversham was a very good school academically. There's no question. If you look at their results, before that inspection and afterwards, they're very high academically. They had a problem there with their safeguarding, and safeguarding is regarded as probably the most important aspect of the oversight of schools. You cannot have, even if the safeguarding itself is fine, but the procedures have to be fine as well, because if you have weak procedures, then something bad could happen in due course. So the procedures were not good enough in Caversham, and that's why she got the grade that she got. What Amanda Spielman then did as a consequence of that was that she made changes so that if a school failed because of safeguarding, they were given an opportunity to put it right within a very short period of time, because you can put safeguarding procedures right pretty quickly, whereas sometimes academic problems in the school can take longer. So I think it's a pity that those who didn't.
Just to put in there, shouldn't that have been foreseen though in advance of things like this happening? Shouldn't that have been something where they'd have gone, hang on a minute, what if we go into a school and there's some sort of recording issue? Because that's, as far as I can tell, I understand it's safeguarding. It was a procedural issue, giving somebody an opportunity to go, we've just found this, right? Can you, do X, Y, Z? Everything else is perfect. Can you do X, Y, Z to resolve it? Which is what happened after the event. All I'm saying is, could there have been it's a very high stakes system anyway. So, I remember, I don't know if this was still the case towards the end, but it's like if your leadership and management wasn't good, then nothing else could be good, or so, something along those lines, right? Stuff like that. And part of that's the one grade system, but just from what you've said, am I right in picking up, though, that you were sort of generally supportive of Amanda Spielman during that period, and how, what she did just after? And
yes, no, totally. I mean, we appointed her, and she was a brilliant Ofsted chief inspector. She was there for 7 years, and she changed the inspection framework so that it focused more on the curriculum, so that schools that were coasting and doing well, despite having a weak curriculum, they were held to account. So I think it was what I mean. The thing. I mean, you make it's a good question, and it's a challenging question, unlike your first two questions at the beginning of the program. I suppose, can you foresee every problem? I wish we could.
In my opinion, that's her job.
Yes, well, no, sure. I wish we had been able to anticipate this problem, and I'm sure Amanda does too. It is just because safeguarding is so important. I mean, imagine if I had said 2 or 3 years before Caversham, let's downgrade the importance of safeguarding. I would have been howled.
That's what no one has suggested that though.
No.
But what we're talking about is a procedural opportunity for somebody to correct a record-keeping or procedural error to save the entire reputation of a school leadership team, of a school community, of a set of because once you get that judgment, it's harder to attract teachers.
I agree with you, but the thing is, I just don't think anybody had anticipated this happening. There's another little angle to this issue that we mustn't forget, in that, and that's something perhaps we shouldn't have done. Maybe that is another regret. That when we came into office in 2010, we said, if the school is outstanding, they won't have to be inspected. And the reason for that decision was to reward high performance. You're a great performing school. We're not going to bother you with all that pressure. Just get on with what you're doing. And we had a resource issue. We had a lot of schools that were underperforming. We wanted Ofsted to focus on those schools. And now we've gone from, the figures are like 68% of schools were good or outstanding in 2010. Now it's 86%. So if you think about 68%, that meant 32% of schools, a third, were either requires improvement or, in category 4, inadequate. So we wanted Ofsted to focus on those schools. But the consequence of that policy was that schools would go year after year after year. There came a point in, I think, about 2020. I can't remember when we changed the policy, 2021 maybe. They've been going for 10 years with no inspections. So had we been inspecting Caversham regularly because it was an outstanding school, so it was not inspected all this period, this thing would have been picked up a long time ago, and we wouldn't then have this other cliff edge issue. It would. So that's a little side issue.
I mean, Amanda Spielman visited Caversham, you know, as part of a test inspection. It wouldn't the same issue have happened whenever they were inspected?
Yes, probably, because it was outstanding, and but I think, I don't know, maybe.
I mean, I understand it. I know emotions are high and everything, but it was just when you were saying about, you know, sort of that you were supportive of say, Amanda Spielman, for example, and, you know, you're happy with what she did and all her achievements. That was the bit I picked up on. I thought the way, and this is only Tom talking, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
If what had happened, and then you're sort of appearing on breakfast TV, podcasts, and whatever afterwards, and you're not showing, in my opinion, a heck of a lot of attrition. You've just showed, to be fair to you, you've just come on and said, you know, you started off by sort of really painting a picture of how bad that was, right? I think there were a lot of people at the time who didn't really think that Amanda Spielman did that. And I think that's where a lot of stuff, I don't know whether you want to come in with a question on that, Dave, but that was my only point to you, Nick, is that where I'm a bit surprised you're still supportive of her after that.
Well, there are two issues there. One is how she handled the tragedy, and it's not for me to comment on that. So it was a very, very challenging period to be chief inspector, and I wouldn't, you know, it was a very difficult period for her and for the government on that issue. But did she do a good job in 7 years as chief inspector? She did. I mean, she contributed to standards rising, and so we shouldn't take that away from her because of what happened. And I know, and it was an absolute tragedy. It should not have happened, and I would do anything to help make it not happen. Have not happened. I can't imagine what the family, even now, is still going through.
But Nick, there's been, to be fair, again, someone in the comments can quote me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there's been, you know, unfortunately, 13, you know, senior leaders, head teachers who have taken their lives, you know, since 2010, directly linked in, you know, there to Ofsted and that process. So I understand what you're saying on Caversham, but you were there from 2010, so you knew potentially the damage that those one-word judgments were doing. And, you know, would there be people out there who might look at that and go, Nick didn't do anything until, you know, on that until it was too late. And even then, you know, it was the back end of. Do you understand? I know that might sound.
Look,
hard,
I do.
Look,
the accountability regime has to be there. We all have a boss, and we have to be held to account for spending public money and being responsible for the education of thousands of children. That people have to be held accountable for that if you hold a senior position as head teacher of a school, whether it's in the state sector or the independent sector. So there are pressures that come with seniority. There's no question whether it's in education or in business. There are pressures that come with the job, and and I don't think we added to that pressure. Ofsted existed prior to 2010. It was established by the 1988 Education Act, which was a conservative piece of legislation, Ken Baker. It was then kept in place throughout Tony Blair's period and Gordon Brown's, and then we kept it in place for the whole of our period of office. And it's an important part of accountability. and I say you can't have that autonomy. You can't give professionals autonomy of how they run their ship if you don't have accountability as well. Otherwise, standards will just decline.
I guess my question, just to jump in, Nick, is, again, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I've read your articles in the Telegraph. I guess the question I have, and which I don't quite understand, is you're very proud of, the improvements in the PISA scores, and rightfully so. And even if you go with Ofsted, what is the connection between one-word judgments and an improvement in exams? Surely, I know you've got concerns about what Labour's doing, but surely any Ofsted which sort of sets out how a school is progressing and is a bit more in depth than a snapshot that's outstanding, good, needs improvement. What do you see as the connection between having that particular Ofsted system that gives that snap judgment, which I think is Tom's concern, and rising PISA scores? Because I have trouble seeing it myself.
It is just about accountability. Look, 86% of schools are good or outstanding. So for 86%, there isn't an issue. So the other 14%, those schools, if you were to visit them, I think you'd be concerned about them, and you'd worry about sending your child to those schools. And we have to sort them out, and and help them improve. And that's what Ofsted helps us to achieve. And I mean, these are difficult judgments to make for Ofsted. They're only there for a short period of time. Experienced HMIs and practicing senior leaders in our education system go in and do the inspections. And we do need to make sure that it's as professionally run as possible, with all the empathy and support that is needed, of course, and they need to be accurate. And a series of chief inspectors, from Michael Wilshaw to Amanda to David Bell before Michael Wilshaw, all those people, Christine Gilbert, all tried to make sure that the inspection regime was as sophisticated and as accurate as it could be. But it has to be there, and no one's saying it can't be improved. Of course it can be improved, and we should always be trying to improve it. I just think, in terms of a one-word judgment, I think it needs to be something that parents and everyone can understand. And I think having 5 different categories can be confusing, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will serve to be as a clear form of accountability as one word judgment. We will see. But